provide a general overview of the concepts in accounting for certain entities that we've looked at in this latter section. Differential analysis, we are looking at what we call bimodal decisions. Management must determine in some instances whether it should lease a piece of equipment or sell it. It must decide whether or not it will discontinue certain operations or continue. And the list goes on. Should I make or buy? Should I replace or keep? Do I process further or do I sell this item as is? Do I accept or do I reject a special price offer? Also, under differential analysis, we consider this concept of sunk costs. Sunk costs are costs that are not relevant. These are historic. They are past tense. An example of this would be if I were to catch the bus and the fare for the bus is $1. Well, let's just say I was not paying attention. I got on the bus, I put my $1 in the cash box, and I took a seat. Well, before we reached the first stop sign, I realized I am on the wrong bus. So I pull the little string. The bus stops at the first stop sign that it arrives to, and I tell the bus driver, I am so sorry. I got on the wrong bus. Can I please have my dollar back? The bus driver is going to look at me and kindly say, no. That $1, therefore, for me represents a sunk cost. As soon as I got on the bus and I put that $1 in the cash box, it is gone. It's historical. It's past tense. There's no refund. It's done. And so there's some cost. Once the money is expended, there's no refund. There's no way to receive any type of refund on that amount, which means that it's no longer relevant. And then the third category that I want to say is differential cost, but I should have said differential cost or differential revenues. Now, this represents the change in revenue or difference in cost across two alternatives. So if I have the option of taking a position with company X and company Y, but company X is willing to pay $100,000 and company Y is willing to pay $110,000, then the differential between the two would be $10,000. The importance of pricing a product appropriately. Now, companies have different approaches to this. The one that we look at is cost. That's the cost to make the product or the cost that's incurred plus markup. Markup is considered the desired return by investors on the assets, i.e. cash invested. Please keep that in mind. It's the desired return on the assets invested. For example, let's say that a group of investors gave $100,000, but they indicated we would like 18% as a return. So the markup is going to be 18% times $100,000 because that's the amount of the assets that were invested. Now let's look at a few other things and we're going to come back to that. Cost is defined differently for these computations. Sometimes it might be total cost that's incurred by the company. In some instances, it might be variable cost only. Sometimes it might be product cost. Whatever the case, in this particular scenario, we will use the total cost approach to pricing. So let's assume then, if we use the total cost, we're going to add the manufacturing or the product cost plus our selling, general, and administrative cost that was incurred. And then finally, the markup percentage is going to be the markup divided by the total cost. So my markup of 18%, which represents the desired return, is not necessarily the markup percent. Instead, it's the markup divided by the total cost. So how do I determine my sales or my selling price based on all this data? Well, I'm going to add my total cost plus the markup. And hopefully that's a fairly straightforward example. So let's look at this. My desired return or markup would be $18,000. That's 18% times $100,000. My total cost, which is direct material, direct labor, factory overhead, selling, general, and administrative expenses, let's assume it's $80,000. So what would be the markup percentage? It's going to be 18,000 divided by 80,000, which is 22.5%. So that's the amount I'm going to have to mark up my cost in order to get that amount of 18,000. And you can see it clearly in this particular example that the cost of 80,000 is added to the markup of $18,000. And again, this red line, even though it's going all over the place, is just to demonstrate that this is the bottom section that I'm looking at of this particular example. Budgets. A budget is merely a way to manage our finances. It's a way that we direct the monies that we expect to come in a certain direction. within organizations, it's a way that we plan, direct, and control operations. Now, there are different reasons why a budget might be ineffective. Here are 3 reasons. The budget might be too loose, which means that if I know that I can sell 10 units of product and I set a goal of 5, that's too loose. I mean, I can do more, but I've set the standards so low. The second reason it might be ineffective is that it's too restrictive. It's just too tight. So instead of saying, I know I can sell 10, you know what? Let me set a goal of selling 100. Well, that would create such stress, because if I'm sure under best conditions I can sell 10, but my goal is 100, that might be a bit of a stretch. So a budget might be ineffective because we can't really meet the goal that's set. And then lastly, it might just not match the corporate goals. Let me give an example of that, but on a personal basis. If I would like to purchase a car and I make $1,000 every week, but every week I love to eat out with friends and I love entertainment. So I decide that I'm going to spend $10 on breakfast, $20 on lunch, but I'll eat dinner at home. Okay, so that's $30 times 5, it's $60, and then I have entertainment, which is about $200 on the weekends. So from this amount that I said that I'm going to be using to save to buy a car, I'm actually spending just on food and entertainment alone $300. That does not include the other necessary expense. Well, if I build in that $300 in my budget, which feasibly I can, it's going to take away from my ultimate goal of purchasing a car. So sometimes the goals don't match with the budget, which means the budget will be ineffective. There are different types of budgets that exist. We have a continuous or zero-based budget. A continuous budget means that every time one month ends, we add another month onto the existing budget. So we always have this rolling 12-month budget or 18-month, whatever the case. A zero-based budget means that at the beginning of a period, I start from zero all over again with completely new sets of analysis in order to determine how much I'm going to spend or how much I anticipate I will be. A static budget is one in which there's one activity level that's presumed. A flexible can accommodate more than one activity. So let me explain that. A static budget, here's an example. In my home, let's say my husband drives to work and I drive to work. Well, I've budgeted that gas will cost X dollars and my distance to work is 30 miles. Something happens, his car is not working, he has to drive to work. I'm using my car, or our car I should say. The car that I budgeted, which I typically drive 30 miles, now has to drive 60 miles one way. Well, if I have a static budget, then I am unable to adjust my budget to reflect that there are 2 destinations, hence double mileage. With a flexible budget, I can just change the numbers to account for the fact that the mileage has increased. And then finally, a master budget. Now, a master budget contains all of the various elements within an economic unit, i.e. a business. There are 2 types of budgets. There's a budgeted income statement, which actually is a budget, but on the budgeted income statement, we have a sales budget, cost of goods sold budget, product cost budget, direct materials budget, direct labor budget, factory overhead budget, selling general administrative budget. All of those are related to the budgeted income statement. And then we have a projected balance sheet budget, which shows cash and capital expenditures. And so with that, we actually reached the final element in this general overview, which is standard cost system. Now within this category, we look at cost variance between what we planned and what actually happened. And the outcomes will either be considered favorable or unfavorable. How do we determine if it's favorable versus unfavorable? Well, if my actual cost was $100, but I budgeted $90, then it's unfavorable. And that's because the actual cost of $100 was greater than the expected standard cost of $90. There are different ways that we can determine the variances, and there's 2 major categories that we'll look at in this class. The first is the direct materials, and the second is going to be direct labor. So on the direct material variances, if we want to find out what is the price variance, i.e. how much did I pay versus how much did I think I would pay, Well, the actual price minus the standard price tells me the amount of the variance, and then I multiply that by the actual quantity of goods that I purchased. Similarly, if I want to find out the quantity variance, I'm going to compare the actual quantity to the standard quantity. That's going to tell me the amount of the variance, and then I'll multiply it by the standard price. And I multiply that by the standard price because the person that's responsible for determining the quantity is going to be my production manager. And so in order to avoid penalizing the production manager for the actual price, the way that I measure the production manager's effectiveness is I'm going to multiply the quantity difference between actual and standard by the standard price. The sum of these variances is considered the total material variance. When we look at direct labor, it's very similar. We have a rate where we compare actual rate to standard rate and multiply by the actual hours. Or we have the hours that we look at where we compare actual hours to standard hours and we multiply that by the standard rate. The sum of both of those again will be the total labor variance. And with that, we've actually done a general overview of accounting for merchandising, manufacturing, and decision makers.